On tonight's Cover One Buffalo podcast presented by William Mattar Law Offices, we will talk all things special teams, but first, our guys, Handsome Jack.
Broadcasting live to Bills Mafia worldwide with Greg Tompsett and Aaron Quinn.
Welcome to the NFL. Doesn't matter what's happened before today. Today's a brand new day. It's a brand new season.
Your number one podcast for objective Buffalo Bills coverage. No matter where you are, we got you covered.
Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo podcast. You're joining your host, Greg Tompsett, along with my partner in crime, Aaron Quinn. Aaron, is it too hot for you? It's too hot for me.
It's pretty hot. I'm happy it's evening. When you said it was evening, yes. That means the sun, that big orb, is going away and at least cool off for a little bit. But yeah, no, I know out there in your part of the world and here in Western New York, we've just been getting blasted here for a couple of days. And we are often complaining about the weather in Western New York, but this is complainable weather. Like everyone's got a gripe to pick with 93 and feels like 100 with 98% humidity. There's not a person in the world that likes that, Greg. This is not fair. We don't need
this is not like being a grumpy old man. Like 93 with 102 temperature feels like with the humidity and everything. That's worth complaining about. It was pretty rough.
Sophia asking if we have AC. We do. I have it at my house. We have central air. Power went out yesterday. That got a little sketchy for a little bit, and we didn't for a little while. But what I will say here in my fancy studio / playroom / workout room, there is no AC. This isn't a garage, and so it's humid. I'm humid today. I'm sweating. We're gonna blow through this show for the safety of one of your favorite co-hosts, trying to get through this without passing out tonight.
So obviously the topic at hand this week is our kind of pivot from offense over to the defensive side, and in between we're going to talk special teams. And it was interesting, producer Chris pre-show, when we were kind of talking through the show tonight, one of the topics came up and he asked, like, was it really as bad or as good as you remember? And as I was kind of preparing, looking through some of the numbers, I won't lie, a lot of them were like, oh, it was actually worse than I remembered. Like our special teams wasn't awesome last year. It was Tyler Bass's worst year of his career. Sam Martin, I'll talk about. It wasn't his best year, but the two areas they care about, he was actually still okay. One area we'll talk about with Tyler Bass, I don't know how much to put on him and how much to put on Tyler Bass. The coverage units were okay. It didn't become terrible, but it wasn't our best season from a coverage unit standpoint. Our return game was fine. There wasn't anything predominant there. And obviously we'll talk about some of the changes as it goes forward there. But as you were kind of getting ready for the show tonight and thinking back on last season, we made the comment during the year last year that for as much money and roster spots as were invested over the first 5 or 6 years of this team, I think maybe we see a little change this year. You're supposed to see better special teams production if you're going to invest that much money and that many roster spots to a unit. I'd like to see more. So no more Taiwan Jones, no more Tyler Matakevich, no more Saran Neal. I don't know if there's going to be, I don't want to say anyone. I don't think there's going to be very many guys on this roster that are going to be like special teams only. You can't play them. Like we saw how bad our linebacking got in the playoff game. We still didn't put Tyler Matakevich out there on the field. That tells you he was a Taiwan Jones running back at linebacker. Like he wasn't really a running back. He wasn't really a linebacker. I don't know how many of those, if any, we're going to have on this team, but I also don't think we can afford to take a step back in special teams production. Where is your mind when you look back on last year and this special teams unit?
Yeah, well, I thought Matthew Smiley's job should have probably been on the
Agreed.
line
Agreed.
heading into the offseason just because of the type of regression we're dealing with. This was a unit that has actually performed really well in the Sean McDermott area with the type of assets.
Historically top 10.
Yeah, asset allocation they've put into this position, whether it was, I think when we think of special teams, obviously think of the points scored through field goals. That did well in the past. But to your point, it is coverage game. It is those units. And we saw them perform really well the last handful of years, and seeing a big regression, but still having the same players and still having the same components. And then also matching that regression, that is a frustrating thing. And to me, it points to coaching. Obviously, you keep Smiley and all the players change. So I would say probably maybe a hot seat year for Matthew Smiley if we continue to see them be middle of the pack in a lot of these statistics or even lower than that. Everyone here that has followed the show for a while knows that I'm a big fan of DVOA. So that was kind of the first place to that question of like, was it really as bad as it looked last year? And that was the first place I looked. And they were total DVOA on special teams. They were 15th, so middle of the pack total. But they were weighted at 28th in the NFL. So against the particular opponents, when you weigh in those opponents, they were one of the last place teams in the NFL and overall special teams. And that takes into account kicking, field goals, punting, punt return, coverage, all that stuff. And in that, punting wasn't terrible. It was really weighted down by kick return given up and by field goal extra points and their lack of ability to get really good kick return numbers. And so Sam Martin probably performed the best out of the unit, and he wasn't great, but he was good enough. And he had that stretch there late in the season where he was really dialing it in before his injury. So that was probably the bright spot of the special teams for the year. But overall, the group really seemed to regress. And to your point, like we're in such a weird position of you don't really have any of these guys on the roster that are primarily here to be special teams captains, to be special teams aces outside of the specialists themselves. But and we'll talk about this in our Here to Help segment. Special teams in the NFL this coming season may be more of a priority than it's been under any year in the Sean McDermott area where they prioritize those roster spots for special teams. So they're going to really rely on guys that are multi-use players to play a premium role. I think more premium than we've seen in the past.
Yeah. So Jonathan asked, and as Aaron just touched on later on in the show, we're going to do the two kicking units first, but then we're going to talk about the new kickoff rules. So Jonathan, your question here, we are going to break that down. I've got a fancy graphic and everything. We'll talk through, and then we'll kind of project what we think that's going to do to some of the selections and some of the other pieces. So we'll see where that goes. I do think it could impact, whether they keep a sixth wide receiver. If they do, is it going to be because of their coverage ability? Like you've seen guys like a Chase Claypool talk about when they're doing that. Are they going to have returners traditionally like the wide receiver? Is going to be more running back? Now that it's there, is going to be more linebackers doing the coverage for the space.
We'll like talk extra DBs that they
yeah. Where does that go? So first, we'll go in maybe reverse order of concern. We have Reid Ferguson. He literally has never messed up a snap in his career, and that's wonderful, and that's all I care about.
Yeah, I wish Reid. You got to chill out with the Canes trying to get not great fried chicken to Buffalo. It's not that cool.
Hey, it's pretty good.
But no, I like Reid. I made Reid the graphic today, and all these special teams shows that we've done over the years. I never made Reid the front of the graphic, and I really should. Like, he is the core, the cornerstone of this special teams unit. Does exactly what we need him to do. I love having Reid Ferguson and Buffalo, and great dude to follow on Twitter and loves this fan base. I hope just give that guy a lifetime contract and keep him around. Do your job, keep doing it.
Makes some tackles here or there, never messes up a snap. Just literally all I care about. Hey, actually, don't mess up a snap. I never have to worry. I literally never even think about the fact of, I hope it's a good snap, because it always is. That's literally all I care about. And then you get into, hey, I do see him down there on the coverage units making some tackles here or there. I did look before going into this, because my first thought was, how old is Reid Ferguson? And he just turned 30. So I won't lie. I don't think I know, hey, how long do long snappers play? But I know there's some of them that go a long ways. There was just that guy in Detroit who was 39 and on his literally his 18th year with the team or something like crazy. So I do know those guys play for a while. I think Reid's still got a healthy amount of time left with the team, and we don't have to worry about it, and that's nice.
Anecdotally, the Ferguson father lives the
Kevin.
dream.
He's great.
Kevin. So years ago, I worked at a Sears, and there was this dude that I hung out with. He was a Cowboys fan, and he gave me the best advice of I've been anti about letting my kids play football, and even back then, I was like, when I have kids, I'm not going to let them play football. And his thing was always like, if you have a kid, teach them to be a long snapper. Even in high school, like they'll get a scholarship. Like if they are good, reliable long snapper, they will get a free education and they could play in the NFL and make a really good and they don't get hit. You don't line up in front of the long snapper. Like, you have a nice, long, good career. They only play 8 plays a game, get a nice check. It's the life. And he was absolutely right. Kudos to him. So kudos to Kevin Ferguson.
I've had the chance to talk to Kevin. He and I randomly sat next to each other a couple days in a row at the Senior Bowl during Blake Ferguson, who is Reed's younger brother, who's the long snapper for the Dolphins. And Kevin has raised 2 sons who both got free college educations, both at LSU. So SEC LSU experiences, which I'm sure was a good time to an enjoyable time to spend your college years. And now I think Reed's on his 3rd NFL contract, maybe his 4th. Blake just signed a new contract, and are both going to have free educations and very, very nice
lucrative jobs,
careers and lucrative jobs, all because you taught them to snap football. So teach your sons how to snap footballs.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. The next one is interesting because I think, like many people, my first look at punting was, Sam Martin was 28th in yards per punt and 29th in net yards, so he must have had a bad year. And don't get me wrong, like, that's not awesome. I'm not going to try to flip it around that like, oh, that was great, but it's also situational. The Bills go like 3 and out in our own 20 really, really rarely. He doesn't get nearly as many chances as other punters to just unleash and kick those crazy 70-yarders because our offense is pretty good. So then I looked and it's like, oh, well, the stuff that matters and what I know matters to McDermott and Smiley and those guys, where was he in inside the 20? And I look as, oh, he was 4th in the NFL in percentage of kicks inside the 20. Where was he in percentage of touchbacks? Oh, he only had 3 touchbacks all year long. He was top 10 in that too. So when you talk about some of the overall ratings in EPA and you talk about how it impacts in a couple of those, he had like a couple insane coffin corner punts and some really, really good ones in some critical moments when the team really needed it. And it opened up my mind because I won't lie, going in as I was trying to get my head around what, how am I going to position this? Who am I interested in? A lot of me was like, hey, maybe we need to look at Jack Browning, the rookie, who I won't, it's interesting. He went to San Diego State, same idea as Matt Araiza, and his stats are actually pretty similar. He also had a very low touchback rate. He also had a very low inside the 20. So he checks all the boxes of, oh, I get why they brought this guy in. He is a younger version of Sam Martin. He also was the kicker at San Diego, which is interesting because, one, that's kind of cool to have a backup kicker on the team if something were to happen to Tyler Bass. Weirdly, it also means I don't think he held because he was a kicker. So he wasn't the holder. So, I'm kind of curious, like, hey, he's obviously spending a lot of time learning to do that. He knows how a kicker likes the ball to be held because he was the kicker, but it's weird. And I'm going to bring him up when we get to the new kickoff rule, because now there is a more material downside to touchbacks. You don't want to just blast it through the end of the end zone. You want there to be hang time. And there's also a much, much higher probability of your kicker being involved in the tackle because there's so many more returns. So do you not want your primary field goal kicker back there? Is it a bonus? Are more teams going to choose, if your punter's capable of kicking off, are you just going to lean that way to not have your kicker as involved in those things? Not that getting your punters injured good either. Like, that's not a great thing either. But all that said, I'm open to Jack Browning taking Sam Martin's job, but ultimately the only thing I care about with punters is how good of a holder they are, because like the difference between the best punter in the league and the worst punter in the league, just all punts are turnovers. It's not that big of a difference. I don't really care that much. We're going to pick the guys who down it inside the 20 and don't have touchbacks more than we do the guys with the crazy bazooka legs, just because Josh Allen doesn't need that as much as those other teams do. So I was a little less excited about it than I was going in as I started to research, because I don't know if I really care, and Sam Martin was actually probably better than I remembered.
Yeah, I think the thing I remember last year with Sam Martin was he came on at an important stretch when the team was really like turning the corner and ramping up to becoming a team that won the division. And he had some big punts in that run and in that stretch. And yeah, punts don't matter. They are turnovers, but like
If you're going to
sometimes
do them, I'd rather guys who are good at it.
sometimes they matter, right? In certain types of games when teams aren't able to score and nobody's moving the ball and your offense stalls out and you can pin a team inside the 20 and get the ball back with good field position and flip. So some of that stuff does matter. And I remember when he got hurt, I remember panicking a little bit of like, oh, he was playing well and now he's hurt and we're bringing back Matt Hawk. And that doesn't taste good in my mouth. Like, I don't want that. And so it matters until it doesn't. And then for me, and we'll talk about this, I think, in a little bit as we get towards the stuff that I'm really concerned about, is how much of the lack of success and the season that we saw from Tyler Bass was related to his holding and Sam Martin's holding. Because I thought he was a good holder. I thought that he did a good job, but I don't know if there was, I don't know the answer to the why we saw what we saw from Tyler Bass last year, but it was something in that mix. It wasn't Reid Ferguson, I don't think. And so it was one of the other two things, and I can't rule out that it was the holder. So to your point, like if this other guy can come in and say he knows kickers a little bit more and Tyler Bass maybe feels a little more confident and comfortable with him, I'm always going to defer to the kicking part of the game that adds points on the board versus the one that pins inside the 20. So it is definitely something I think in camp that I'm going to be keeping an eye on. I want to watch, and it's not just watching the punts at camp, but it's watching who's holding for Tyler Bass and how does he look when whoever it is holding, because I think that's going to be one of the more interesting storylines going into the year. Is if you would have asked me a year ago how I felt about Tyler Bass, even early in the year last year, like I felt like he was becoming one of these guys that, he just needed like a defining kick in a big moment to really put himself on the stage with some of these other top kickers in the league. And now after the performance that we saw last year, that confidence is kind of gone, and I'm waiting for him to gain that back. And so that plays a big role in this conversation about Punter.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch. I was a little surprised they didn't approach Sam Martin to redo his deal. His numbers pretty, guaranteed for this year. It's not a huge amount of money, but it's still guaranteed, and it's 1.55 million. His base salary is guaranteed.
And when you're eating that Diggs money, more guaranteed money just feels worse.
Yeah, he's gonna count like 1.95 million, regardless of whether he's on the team or not. Like, he's going to count against us. So if Jack Browning beats him out, that's fine. It is what it is. I'm not going to be upset. But I assume Sam Martin's going to be our punter and our holder. Yeah. So I'm open to Jack Browning making it. I don't think Jack Browning's like some amazing guy that you absolutely have to have. I think he's fine. And if he's on our practice squad, kind of getting ready, because Sam Martin is 33, he'll be 34 this season. I'm fine with that. And like I said, if he beats him out, that's fine too.
Yeah, and Sam Martin coming off an injury last year.
Correct. Yeah, the hammy that impacted him after chasing down that weird block. And speaking of that weird block and a weird season, the opposite of Sam Martin, where I looked as I was researching, like my gut, he was better than I remembered as I kind of went through and looked, like, all right, he was actually pretty good at this, and he was pretty good at that. Tyler Bass was worse than I remembered. I remembered, obviously, missing that field goal at the end against the Chiefs. That's hard to remember or hard to forget. He was 2 of 5 in the playoffs. He was 1 of 3 against Pittsburgh and 1 of 2 against Kansas City. So 2 of 5 in the playoffs. That's also hard to forget. So a lot of people have that in their mind. But the previous 2 seasons, he had missed 4 field goals each of those years. He was 28 of 32 and 30 of 34, 87, 88%, which is right up there with some of the best in the league. And now, last year was 26 of 34. He missed 8 field goals, 76%, which was, obviously not great in overall in the league. In regular season, he was 23rd in the league overall, including the playoffs. He was 30th in the league in field goal percentage. he did have his best extra point season. He only missed one. He had missed two or three each of the previous seasons. So I guess that's a slight positive in the overall percentages, but he had a short miss, one between 20 and 29 yards, one between 30 and 39 yards. He was 5 of 9 from 40 to 49. So it's not even like all of these were really long misses. Like 5 of 9 from 40 to 49 is not acceptable. You cannot be 55% in 40-yard field goals in the NFL. And was 4 of 6 from 50. He was better from beyond 50 than he was from 40 to 49. His contract's a mess. Like, there's nothing we can do. He costs more for us to get out of his deal and to release him than to simply keep him. Right now, he's going to have a $4.4 million cap hit. And if we were to release him, it would be $7.4 million. He costs $3 million more to release him than to keep him. So our only hope is, hey, I hope you do better. Like, that's it. That is our entire hope, is that, hey, I hope you do better. We have some options the following year, but it's not even great to get out of his deal next year. Like, we need to hope that he gets back to what he was, where he was, 87, 88%, one of the best kickers in the league, feeling really good about it. We never had to, we didn't really worry about it the previous 2 seasons. We really rebuilt our confidence, and last year was ugly. And our only chance is to be like, hey, I hope you turn it around.
Yeah. One I want to talk about real quick, again, kind of anecdotally. Fans really sucked after that missed kick to Tyler Bass. That wasn't cool.
It was terrible. He wasn't why we lost that game. He was
no. And even if he was
on the list, but he wasn't the reason we lost that game.
Even if he was, like, get a life. Go touch some grass. If you're gonna, like, write a person in their DMs and, like, tell them to kill themselves or whatever people were, like, the stuff people were saying, like, it's sports,
sadly
guys.
That was
like,
specifically what some people were doing, and others did other also terrible things.
Yeah, you can't do that stuff. Like, this should not be a hobby for you if that is your reaction to a lost sporting event. But with Tyler Bass, I was talking about it here before we went live when we were talking about him. The thing that always concerns me in moments like this with a guy, so like kicking is probably you have to probably have the most mental focus and locked in, because like every other player, a cornerback can make a bad play and they have to come back out and make a play again. So like you have a short-term memory and you have another chance right away to make a play, where a kicker, in Tyler Bass's case, he's had to wait a whole full off season, right? But even in games, you make a kick. If you miss a kick, you might not get a chance the rest of the game to redeem yourself or go out and correct that mistake. And if you do, you have to sit there and think about that the entire time until you do have a chance to go out and do it again. And it's so routine based, and it's so, like, I do a lot of golf, right? And if you get out of a routine in golf and you can't find that stroke or find that thing again, like, it's so frustrating. It wears on you mentally. I think kicker is that of the NFL. And what concerns me in a situation like this is, for basketball fans out there, it reminds me of the Nick Anderson in the finals against the Rockets. One of the better free throw shooters in the league at the time. In game 1, he missed 4 consecutive free throws, and it allowed the game to go into OT. The Rockets won. Rockets ended up going on to win the series. But after that, Nick Anderson, like, never recovered. And he's talked about it in the past. Like, he became like a mediocre to bad free throw shooter from then on out. He was just never able to get that confidence back and get that
the baseball, the Chuck Knoblochs and the Rick Ankiels, and like the yips are real. Like, there's not a ton of science behind exactly what it is, but like getting in your own head and not being able to come back from it is real.
Yes. And producer Chris said Scott Norwood came back and he did a good job, but he had that mental ability. And I don't know. And this is where it's going to be the real test of Tyler Bass is, can he get past that? That was a big miss. He felt the weight of it. He felt the frustration of the fan base. Early reports, even though OTAs don't matter, early reports were mixed from the things I saw in OTAs of his success there. I think that people are going to be hanging on every kick of his in training camp and all throughout the season. I don't know at what point, and maybe this is a question for you, Greg, is like, when will we rebuild as fan base that confidence in Tyler Bass to be able to come out and feel automatic in a situation where the game's on the line and we need him to make it? Is it going to be all the way to the playoffs, or is it something like, as the season ramps up, if he comes out and he's back to where he was, like, because I wasn't feeling confident when they ran him out there because of the way the season was. It was like, this doesn't feel like a sure thing anymore with him.
Yeah, and as you look back, He did start the season 9 of 9
Yeah.
in the first 5 games.
We talked on a post-game show of like, people need to start respecting this guy. He's
Correct.
one of the best kickers in the NFL.
He had not missed anything. Then he had that Giants game where he missed 2 in an ugly game where we needed those points.
Yep.
Like that was a game where we needed both of those points. The next week he missed again in New England. So now he was 1 of 4 in a 2-game stretch there. Calmed down again where he didn't miss any for 4 weeks. But then the Eagles game, 2 more misses in that game, in 2 of 4. And then again, kind of finished the season pretty strong. And over the final 5 games of the season, didn't have another miss and was 6 of 6 over those final 5 games. And you're like, okay, maybe we're feeling pretty good. And then in the Pittsburgh game to go 1 of 3, and it just like the game wasn't that close, so they didn't really come into play, and you could kind of tell yourself of like, well, like, all right, maybe it was just kind of bad luck. And obviously different guys, Mike was asking, could it be the holder? Lots of different people talking about, like, I don't know that any of us know, and I don't know that we're going to find out. We're not going to know, hey, was it because he was in his own head? Is it because he had a slight injury we didn't know about? Is it because
I think there was some weather to some of those misses. There's a lot of sloppy weather games this year, and kicking in Buffalo is hard, but you get paid to do it too.
Sophia here bringing up, he had a ton. How many times do you remember during the season where you're like where it was, oh my God, I can't believe he made that? I remember a lot of extra points specifically where it was like, holy crap, did that go in? Or how, like, there were a ton of them where I didn't feel great about it. They were not striped dead center.
Some of the misses were like bad misses.
Yeah, and a couple of them were like duck hooks, like really, really like me on the golf course.
I was gonna say me off the tee box today. Yeah,
really, really ugly. So again, I am open to the idea that there are really good kickers who have had bad seasons. Like that is not a death knell. That does not mean he's bad from now on. There are really good kickers. You go back and look at Matt Prater, Justin Tucker, some of the best kickers. There are rough years in those stretches that were not,
for sure,
just every single year. Now, granted, some of those guys, the best guys, most of their seasons are very, very good, but they've had a bad season and then come back and been okay. He's only been doing this for a couple years. To have 1 bad season out of 4, and realistically it's only 1. Like the other 3 seasons were pretty darn good. We should be open to the idea that, hey, he's a really good kicker, he can bring this back, but we need to see it. He's got to do it. We don't have any options financially right now. We're locked into this guy. We need for him to be good. And all we can do is hope. That's literally it. I wish there was a better analysis, or that I could give you some secret response of how these things work, but honestly, all we can do is hope. We just got to hope that he gets it back and that he's the same powerful, consistently accurate, good kicker that he's been.
Yeah, I think we'll see what his mental makeup is going into this year. Like if he can turn it around, then, and that might be the lesson that we need long term, to know that we can rely on him, that he can have some down periods of time and then get it back. Because if he responds back to a similar year like he's had in the past, then we know that he's mentally tough, mentally able to get over a bad miss, mentally able to improve on himself. And so it's a good opportunity. And I'm sure that is exactly how Sean McDermott's framing it for him. If I've learned anything about Sean McDermott, he's using that failure that Tyler Bass went through as an opportunity to push him to say, hey, this is your opportunity to show everybody that you are actually who we thought you were. So
yeah. So here are a couple other comments. Steve asking, does the punter competition not hurt Bass in the long run? And Andy saying, teach someone else to hold and Browning can fill in if Bass has the yips. One, you can't teach another guy to hold. Like the number of reps that you need now, the way the team is structured, you can't pull another guy away. You need the backup quarterback running the practice unit and the scout team. You, like, everybody else has a job that they're doing, and you need so many reps doing it. The long snapper, the punter, and the whole, and the kicker,
they're off to the side while everyone else
they're off
practicing.
to the side doing that all the time. Like, it's not realistic. There has not been a player outside of there of any NFL team in over a decade. This is simply not a thing anymore. There are
only
no backup quarterbacks.
It's a Madden thing.
Yeah, great. That's a Madden thing. That's not real. Like that, there are no teams that do that. It comes up all the time. It is not realistic. It just, no NFL team does that. If somebody else figures it out, I'll be open to it. Right now, the way the CBA sets up the number of practice reps and how you're allowed to run practices now, it's not realistic. You cannot you can't have another guy do it. However, I will say it is something to ask of like, hey, it's actually why I feel more strongly now as I thought through this of why I think it's just going to be Sam Martin. I don't know that they're going to flip over and do another new guy and change it again with another holder after, a couple of Matt Hack seasons and the other stuff previously, and then to Sam Martin and now another one to Jack Browning. Again, if he beats him out and it works, great. But a guy who's never held for field goals on top of the fact that he'd be a rookie punter, I think it's going to be Sam Martin. And Sam Martin has a guaranteed contract. All the tea leaves are telling you that he's going to be the guy.
Yeah, and we talk about the hold part of it, but back to Reid Ferguson, there's that aspect. It's a 3-person unit there in the specialists when it comes to the field goals, and all 3 of them have a working relationship together. And I think that's going to matter to Sean McDermott. That's going to matter to Matthew Smiley. They don't have to recoach, rework what they've already done. Those guys have multiple reps, and while it wasn't all successful, they have many successful reps together, and they've had success together. And so I think wanting to keep that continuity across the specialists is something that's probably important to the Bills. That's why the contracts have been the way they've been for those guys. And so that would actually be an interesting thing to have Reid on some point and talk to him about like what all goes into those processes. Because I think we just see him go out there, snap a ball, put it down and kick it. And when it doesn't go exactly right, we're all mad. But I think there's a lot more nuance to it. And I know Reid's come out and said like, oh no, that one was on me. Like the way I snapped it, the ball didn't get into somebody's hands the right way. And he didn't have enough time to do it. So it's a fine-tuned, super quick thing that happens. And it's easy for us in hindsight to be like, oh, just put a new holder back there and everything will be fine. But it's not that easy. There's a lot of reps of practice that go into that.
Well, you look at how often are guys like really close to blocking those kicks. It's because the 10th of a second matters. Like
That's
it has to be exactly right down to a very precise amount of time.
Yeah.
So our final portion of the show here going to be brought to you by our friends over at William Attar Law Offices, and how it's here to help is this new rule in the NFL. So I'm going to bring up the graphic here that's going to show the new hybrid kickoff rule. This top picture just shows kind of the idea of where the guys are going to be. And you look at the kicker is over here, going to be at their own 35, same as it was in years past. But instead of the rest of the kickers and the X's, the rest of the kickoff unit being lined up with him here, all running together down the field, all of the teams, and the same thing, the return unit would have been like spread out between the goal line all the way up to like the 50, actually the 45, usually 10 yards away in case of an onside kick. They are all going to be here. Each of them are 5 yards apart in what they're calling the setup zone and the kickoff start line, where everyone is there. So there's not this 40-yard sprint for impact, where that's why you saw such a high percentage of injuries. So the reason, and this is maybe one of the things the NFL has done the most genuinely in player safety, is that kickoffs were one of the highest proportion or percentage of injuries of any play, but it also was a fun, exciting play. So trying to find a scenario where they found a compromise of, hey, how can we reduce the likelihood of injury, but still keep the fun and excitement of it? And anybody who's seen the plays from the XFL, this is where this came from. This was an XFL experiment that was adopted by the NFL. It's in this new setup. So some of the different pieces here, we talked about the kicking team, other than the kicker, cannot move until the ball hits the ground or the player in the landing zone or the end zone. So they are all just sitting there waiting. They cannot retreat. They cannot start running. The ball is kicked off and everybody waits, besides the returners, to get in position to be able to catch it, and cannot start until then. All players on the receiving team in the setup zone can also not move until the kick has hit the ground or the player in the landing zone or end zone catches. So the guys lined up, everybody lined up there, which would be the 10 coverage guys and probably 9 return blockers. Those 19 guys can't move. They got to wait until the ball touches the ground or the receiver receiving returner catches it. Any kick that lands in the landing zone, so again, that's the green area down here at the bottom. It's between the goal line and the 20. That's where the league wants the ball to land and wants to encourage teams to have to return it from there. Any kick that hits in the landing zone must be returned. So if the kickoff unit gets the ball to land anywhere between the end zone and the 20. Obviously, they want it closer to the end zone. Ideally, they want it to hit at like the 2.
Right.
The return team has to return it. Any kick that hits before the landing zone, so if you do too much of a pop-up and it lands at the 25 or 30, the return team gets the ball at the 40. So you get a really, really good return out of it, and almost like a penalty kicking it out of bounds. Same thing if it goes out of bounds, you get it there at the 40 as well. If the kick hits in the landing zone but rolls into the end zone and is downed, that's at the 20. So that's kind of like a positive for the kick unit. So again, encouraging teams to have a pop-up that lands between the 2 and the 5, and then he's either returned poorly or goes into the end zone, and they only get the ball at the 20. If a kick lands in the end zone or goes out of the back of the end zone, it's a touchback to the 35. So again, encouraging teams to not kick it into the end zone, and encouraging or requiring the return teams to return it. Anyone who's watched the XFL videos of this, it's really, really fun. It's going to add in it. I would say percentage wise, you have fewer of the like returns that go to the 30 or 40. A lot of them are going to be tackled inside the 15, inside the 20. Because they're trying to run around and do stuff and you don't have that much room to go at. But when they pop them, you get more of the 50, 60 and return touchdowns. So I think it's going to be more variance to both degrees. Last year, in my mind, I didn't do the research, but it felt like I remembered a ton of returns that were between like the 23 and the 27. Like a ton of them were like, they almost got to the 25, or they barely got over it. And it didn't really matter. Like you were going to get the touchback to the 25 anyways. And I remember a ton of them being like right there where it's like, all right, doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
And the one other piece here, Charles asking, so no possibility of a surprise onside kick, which honestly only happens like once or twice a season. Correct. You cannot do the surprise onside kick anymore. You have to declare it. And Andy with the good catch. That graphic I brought up, it has been amended since then. The original proposal was the touchback goes out to the 35. That was a slight gripe from special teams coaches. For this year, it's the 30, and I've heard that the intention is to switch it to the 35 the following year. So this year, there's maybe not quite as much of a penalty if you kick it out of the end zone on a touchback, because it just goes from the 20 to the 30. But the year after, it's intended to go to the 35, where they're really forcing you to return it and to not kick a touchback.
So you quiz me all the time randomly and by surprise. So I got one for you real
Ready.
quick. What do you think was the highest percentage of returned kicks against a kicker? So like return kicks from a kicker this year. What do you think in the NFL in the last season was the highest percentage returned of their kickoffs?
There were some that were really low, I think. I'm going to guess the highest was 36%.
47.5%. Anders Carlson of the Green Bay Packers at a 47, but it drops off. You were pretty 50%. Close. So third place was 37. So you're close. You're right there. Tyler Bass's was 29.2. What I don't know is how many of them were just kicked out of the end zone type kicks and not even returnable, but I'm expecting those numbers to go way up here, right? Because that's the idea behind this rule is you can't just boot it into the end zone.
They're targeting an 80 to 90% return rate, which is what they see in the XFL.
Yes, which is going to mean
if you pop it up and it lands between the 0 and the 20, which some of these kickers are capable of doing every time, you would have a 100% return rate, because every single time you have to return it.
That's what they're hoping for. That's, I think, what is going to be the goal. But that, we didn't get into the position groups of that, but that's probably going to be one of the more interesting things about even the bottom half of this roster is instead of only playing 30% of those kickoff coverage snaps, like besides actually just running down the field and then slapping everybody on the head, you're going to have real football plays baked into here.
You get to
at a much
80
higher
to 90%.
Percentage.
It'll be an average of about 75 returns per team, whereas last year most teams were between like 20 and 30.
Yeah.
So it is like 50 more plays,
real football
actual plays. Real football plays is a significant increase.
Yeah. And so it's, I know people have mocked the Bills in the past for how much they put into special teams and invested into it, but like this is the year but it's so weird. We're in such a juxtaposition as Bills roster because for so many years they put so much precedence into special teams and carrying just specific special teams players. That type of player is kind of gone off the roster, but now you actually are in a position where it's like, wow, well, now you have an increase of 60% more of these plays, and we're going to need some of these guys to really get down there and tackle and really cover and block and run. And so it's just a weird spot that the Bills are in and where the NFL is. And I think it's going to make for some interesting, when we're putting together these rosters and depth charts here throughout the summer of who makes it. Is it, like, to your point, is it going to be more wide receivers, or running backs going to take some of those duties? Are we going to see more linebackers and coverage units and stuff like that? Really interested to see how teams approach it.
So 2 good questions here. Andy saying, do you think some teams may drive a low kick into the end zone so it skips through the end zone for a touchback at the 20?
Good.
I have no idea, but I'm confident that's going to be
someone will try that.
I will say, I think you're overestimating how easy that is, because there's also 2 lines of guys at the 30 and the 40. So, like, what if it hits them?
You've never seen me skull a drive.
You can't squib it because there's guys standing there, including the return team standing there.
Right.
And if the ball touches before the 20, they get the ball at the 40. So you would have to be so good at a low kick that it goes over the return guys, but not so high that it goes into the end zone, but also high enough that it doesn't touch before the 20. So no, as I've thought through this, no team's going to do that. That's not going to be a thing. I will say there's going to be a lot of this kind of discussion of literally exactly what I just did live, of special teams coaches and people getting together, talking through all the crazy ideas of, hey, what if we tried this? What if we tried that? Hey, what if we did this? There's going to be a lot of that. There's going to be a lot of experimentation, which will be fun because we don't see that in the NFL all that often. Like, every once in a while you get these little wrinkles of the Wildcat, or like even last year a little bit Miami, that like burst motion thing. Like, you don't see like true innovation all that often, and this is going to be a fun one. Sophia with another one here. I want to clarify a little bit. She's saying kick returners can build up a head of steam before the defenders can arrive to tackle. I don't think that's quite accurate, because the returner can't start running forward until they catch the ball, and the defenders can start running when they catch the ball. So there's no head of, like, they don't get a head
and they're
start
further
or
ahead
like that.
They're starting
and they're way closer. So like, I don't think they're getting some big advantage, because both guys can start moving at the same time.
Yes.
And they're closer together than they were before. So if you go watch some of the clips of the XFL, there's not some big head start or some head of steam. It's not like they're both starting running at about the same time and are 25, 30 yards apart, not the 60 yards apart they were before.
And I actually think it's an advantage as a defender. It's I don't have professional football experience, if you didn't know that, but in my experience of football, it's much harder to run full steam from a further distance to go make a tackle, especially in open field, than it is to a normal traditional play where you're like in a blocking stance and you can see a guy and you can shed a block and go make a tackle.
This is way more like a spread out zone run.
Yeah.
It's going to look way more like that.
That's why you see like those gunners and stuff with a lot. They'll be running full speed, and all somebody has to do is make one move and you can juke them out, because it's harder in that full speed running, I think, than them coming in. So I think it's going to make for, to your point, those higher variance plays where a lot of guys are going to get tackled at the 10, 15 yard line, but then all it's going to take is somebody to make a nice move or get a nice hole and block, and people are going to start taking off, and we're going to see kick return touchdowns happening again.
And the second part of her question, which is kind of a fun part, doesn't Travis Clayton make sense in this case? That's a really fun idea. He's also never played NFL football before. He's training at tackle, not at returning. I know he played rugby, but I actually have a few friends who are from the UK and Bills supporters who have been very, very quick to remind everybody he played at like the 4th level of professional, like they use like finger quotes, like professional rugby. It was like the idea of like, if you know a guy who played semi-pro football in an area, like it's not,
I did that.
He was not like some high-end rugby player. There, he is big and fast, which is cool, and I'm open to that. I don't know that I trust that he's going to get over in position to catch a corner, kickoff, and he's never caught the ball like that in any experience.
It's going to be tight.
It's a fun idea, but I don't think is realistic. But if we get a 6'7", 300-pound guy running with the ball, I'll be excited about it, but I don't expect it. And I do think, as Aaron kind of whispered, the two things that I think we should expect here, and we don't know team by team, there will be some teams who still have a wide receiver do it. I think that we'll see way more running backs than we have in the past. I think you're going to see a lot more of who's the Bears guy who just signed with the Jets? Tariq Cohen. Way more Tariq Cohens versus your like traditional, Dante Hall was like a really skinny guy. Isaiah McKenzie. So I don't think we're going to see as many of those guys anymore. And not 100%, but I think we see more running backs. And in the same vein, I think we see fewer of the like tall, skinny wide receivers running down just because they were fast and could get there in time. I think we see more linebackers and more safeties than corners. I think that guys who are more stout in space and can like tackle in a short area that you would want covering a zone run, to the outside, where I do want more linebackers and safeties doing that and fewer small corners doing that. So we'll see where that comes from. And Ken asking here, if this will change who kicks. We did talk about that at the beginning of the show. I think that's, I know Kansas City talked about it because Justin Reed was kind of like their backup kickoff guy. If you happen to have a guy who's capable of doing it, it's not out of the question, but I don't think that all of a sudden becomes a thing. I don't know that we're going to all of a sudden find a bunch of linebackers and safeties who are kickoff guys, because it is a very specific, accurate zone. And Justin Reed could do that because he could just lay into it and try to kick it through the end zone. I don't know that he's all of a sudden going to have the accuracy to like have that pop up high hang time kick at the 2-yard line specifically. So I'll be very surprised if we see non-specialists doing kickoffs. But again, just like the comment to Andy and everything else, I guarantee that's being discussed.
People will try.
There's going to be some experimentation here, and that's fun. Experimentation is fun.
Yep.
Mike Malley said, Josh Allen, a kick returner, you shut your dirty mouth. I don't want him back there a single time in the history of ever. Never, ever, ever.
Not even close. Never.
Not even once.
No.
Aaron, any other special thoughts on special teams?
No, I hate talking about special teams. So this was it for the year. I hope we don't really ever have to bring it up unless Tyler Bass is nailing game-winning kicks on the post-game show, and we can talk about that. But other than that, I don't want to. I don't want to talk about Sam Martin this year because that means he's just doing his job fine. I don't want to talk about Reid Ferguson. I like Reid. I don't want to have to talk about him because that means something went wrong. And same with Tyler Bass. Like I only want to talk about positives of like, that big game winner. Tyler Bass just went out and nailed. But I do have a feeling we're going to talk a lot about it because to your point, that type of variance in terms of coverage is going to be a thing this year in the NFL. And I don't like talking about special teams, but you know what? If it adds more exciting plays and more actual football plays, I think it's become a little bit pathetic in the NFL that kickoffs were just kind of like, okay, it's going out of the end zone. Everybody's pretending to run down like they're going to tackle somebody and nobody's really doing a whole lot with it. So we're putting the ball in play. I think that's good for the game. And it seems to be in a safe way that isn't going to risk injury. So I'm all for it. I'm interested to see how it goes. And it adds a new variance, to your point, to the game that people are going to have to strategize for. And I love that aspect of it. So that's all cool stuff. But I'm more excited that we're beyond this now. And next week we get to start getting into the defense because I'm really excited about this Bills defense here coming into this year. So I'm excited for how those shows are going to go.
Yeah, so we're excited. We're going to have all kinds of shows coming up for you here. As Charles brought up here, it's going to make the preseason and training camp more interesting. Like we'd go to the bathroom and go get a drink during the special teams units at training camp, and now I'm going to be very interested to watch how they're experimenting doing stuff in early preseason games and early season games. The teams that figure this out more quickly are going to get a marked advantage. Like there are going to be teams that I guarantee there's some team that in the first half of the season ends up with like 4 kick return touchdowns because they figure out a wrinkle that everybody else doesn't quite have figured out yet. And some teams really going to leverage that, and it would be neat if that's the Bills.
I also think there's going to be a team that puts out like a star player to do this, and it feels successful to start, and then like they overuse that player and results in injury or something to that,
or they get worn out or something.
I could see a Tyreek Hill being used over, but although they have a bunch of running backs that can do it in Miami too, so we'll see. Actually, I'm terrified of Miami in this scenario, but
I don't love the speed that they've still like. I don't care if it's Tyreek Hill. I don't care if it's Jalen Waddle. I don't care if it's Devon Achane, Raheem Mostert. Like they have so much team speed that it doesn't matter.
They can play rock, paper, scissors for who gets to do it.
It's gonna suck. Like it's not gonna be cool. I'm not excited about them running with this no matter what. Anyways, so a final message here from our guy, William Matar, sharing where you can think of if you get yourself into a difficult situation.
If you've been in a car crash, you should know this. At William Matar, there's no fee until we win. That means you don't pay us unless we win your case. If you're hurt in a car, call William Matar, 444-4444.
Gotta love it. Excited for it. And one other little sneak preview. We just got ourselves set up. You and our man Anthony are going to be heading out to join Del Reed and all the fun people over at MafiaCon on July 20th. So that's going to be neat. Kind of a fun event for fans to go and say hello. So if you want to come and say hello to Aaron and Anthony, they're going to be there representing Cover One at the MafiaCon.
Yeah, I'm excited to mingle up with some fans. Like getting together with Anthony, so that'll be good as well. Yeah, excited. It looks like a great group, people that they're having out there. A lot of festivities going on, and it's always good to be with Bill's Mafia. And anything Dell is a part of, I want to be a part of. I say it all the time. Like, there's not a lot of dudes out there that make me want to be better at being a human being, but Dell is definitely one of those dudes that whenever I see him doing stuff, it's like, dude, I got to be better at doing this human being stuff because he's killing it.
Yeah, he's the best of us. I'm very comfortable saying it. He's as good as it gets. Love Dell. So thank you to everybody here. It's been a lot of fun. Keep looking out for all the stuff that we have going on. Great coverage across Cover One. We're going to be here for you all off season long. Aaron and I will be back with you next week, getting ready for now talking about the defense. And we will talk through how we want to have things go. We might have to shuffle around the days. I got some work travel coming up here, but we'll be here for you and ready to talk about it as we go. But on behalf of producer Chris Kepner and Aaron Quinn, I am Greg Tompsett. You've been listening to Cover One Buffalo, and we are out.